Thank you and welcome everybody to this MOOC again. I have the pleasure today to welcome with us Ms. Taghreed Jaber, who is a Regional Director for Penal Reform International in Middle East and North Africa. Taghreed is a fantastic human rights activist who has been involved in human rights work for more than 2 decades, defending the rights of children, women, persons deprived of their liberty in different areas of the world, especially in the MENA region and the Arab world. And she has worked and collaborated both with governmental and non-governmental organizations. And she will tell you a bit more about her work during her presentation. The presentation itself will focus mainly on justice for children in the region and also challenges and processes that are happening on the ground, and importantly, on what could be effective solutions and responses. So I'll leave it to Taghreed right now. Welcome again, Taghreed. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela, for this introduction. And thank you for the MOOC program, for such an interesting, actually, comprehensive program that is focusing on children deprived of their liberty. And I am honored, actually, to be part of the group of speakers who are addressing the program students and participants through these different sessions and workshops. As you mentioned, I work as the Regional Director for Penal Reform International. I have been doing that for the past 12 years. And through our work as an organization, we work directly with governments and authorities through providing technical assistance to them to upgrade and update the criminal justice systems in line of international standards for human rights. Justice for children has been one of the topics that is very close to my heart through my career and working with the organizations, where I do believe that if we want to see any change in this world, we should always invest in the young people and the children. And this is in all fields, including also the justice sector. And we all have to put all of the efforts available to make sure that children are diverted from delinquency and they have equal and good opportunities to live a proper life in their societies within their families in order for them to contribute to the future in a good way. We as an organization work on several issues. We also deal with all parts related to the adults in detention and in contact with the law. We focus on women, we focus on vulnerable groups within the system, and we work with all of the justice sector chain, starting from police to the prosecutor to the judiciary. And our niche area is the detention facilities and prisons. And we also work on areas that focus on post-release and aftercare. And through my presentation today, I will try to take you through a number of phases that children has to deal with, and especially in detention in the MENA region, where I would be giving you some practical examples from our work on the field. Not everything that I will say is written in the presentation. The presentation is a general guideline for you as participants in the MOOC program. And if you have any further questions or would like to elaborate more, I'm available for the Q&As. And after that also, you're welcome to approach me for any further clarifications. And with that, allow me to start with my presentation. Justice for children. Let me start by giving you some general information about children in the MENA region so we understand the category about which we are talking. MENA region in general is a very young generation where nearly half of the population is under 24, and that 1 in 5 people in the region are between age to 24. However, these children who live in this MENA region suffer from a number of problems that has been affected by the conflict surrounding us and that is going on in many of the countries. As a result of that, you will find out that 1 in every 5 children in MENA is not in schools, while girl child are twice likely to drop schools than boys. The armed conflict in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen brought around 14.3 million children up until 2007 out of school. Why I'm mentioning schools and dropping from schools when I'm talking about children and juvenile? We all know the interrelated relation between school dropping and delinquency. It's one of the main factors that would lead for many children to become parts of organized gangs or be abused by others through being in the streets and then being recruited to take part in criminal acts and actions. So whenever we talk about this issue, we need to keep these figures into consideration while we're talking about the children delinquency and children in contact with the law in the MENA region. The other general principle that I would like to emphasize in my presentation, that out of our work as an organization and through the international standards, we all are stressing that children should be dealt with through a specialized juvenile justice system. The idea of a specialization is core and very important for working with the children due to their specificities, characteristics, age group, and all of the other issues related to their ability to do informative decisions and their mental and psychological ability at a certain age. So we need specialization bodies to deal with these children. The idea of these specialization justice systems, they should work to preserve public safety and at the same time uphold the right of the children. Through all of the processes and any work of the justice system, best interest of the child should be a primary consideration. The practical attention should be given to alternative to prosecution, and any action that should be taken towards these children should focus at their reintegration into society. We need to agree on these principles before we start going down further, because we will look, are the situation in the MENA region really preserving these rights and taking them into consideration? Does it really stand based on the standards that we have just said that they should be the core for the treatment of children? Now I will take you with me to a part that I like to call reality check, where we're going to be looking at the situation through footage from the places in which children are detained in Yemen and in Iraq. Let's have a look at the photos and we can talk about that further. This is Yemen. This is a detention facility in Yemen. A toilet in Yemen, inside the prison. This is the section that involves children accompanying their moms, and this is the ventilation system that they have. This is the yards where children have their time to spend out. These are the stairs. These are the actually some of the sewage system pumps that are there. These are some photos of the damages that took place due to the war and the conflict in Yemen. This is where children sleep. And this is how they sleep inside dormitories, you see. And this photo, which is a very harsh one, is from a juvenile care center in Iraq. And this photo is for a women detention facility in Iraq that includes their children who are accompanying them. And at the end of the presentation, I would like to talk about children accompanying their mothers in detention and the specific regulations that should be taking into considerations towards their treatment. I think the photos speaks for themselves about the challenges. It's very important that we really understand the context in which we are working for us to really be able to support proper interventions on the ground. Realistic, effective, proper interventions on the ground that can really contribute to change the life of those children in detention. As you can see, overcrowding, which means it's impossible to do proper classification. Poor living conditions, including basic services, health, hygiene, food, clean water, and clothes, which means a need for urgent living conditions that can affect the death or life of some people. Violence and abuse, I guess, can be really common in such situations. Not separated from adults. In many of the countries, children are not separated from adults inside detention. And for us, as I see it, the bigger problem is that children are kept in detention. The idea that children should not be kept in detention facilities. They should be kept in specialized juvenile care centers that are not supervised by the military, the army, or the ministries of interior. They should be supervised by civilian power within the authorities, similar to the system that we have in Jordan and in Yemen and some other countries. Lack of staff training, lack of resources, as you can see, financial and human resources, and sometimes there's a lack of political will to invest in this sector. Juveniles in detention or adults in detention actually are not among the most popular groups within the societies that governments decides to invest in. There's a lack of proper and meaningful rehabilitation, psychological, mental support programs. And when you see these photos sometimes with this overcrowding, you will ask yourself where we can organize such programs and how can we organize such programs. Dropping from education by the laws by juvenile justice laws and justice for children laws in all of the Arab region, it all includes provision that says that children inside detention should pursue their education. But unfortunately, if you look at the practice, you will find that little number of children have the luxury to access to the regular education. Community rejection or sympathy in post-conflict. This is related to children convicted for security crimes, post-ISIS, post-Daesh groups. So it's either that the community will reject them entirely or the community would look at them as heroes. I remember once I was in a meeting in Lebanon and one of the judges were just telling us that if anyone comes out of prison because of his association with a certain violent group, his community will see him as a hero. Lack of support from NGOs or closed doors, government unwillingness to cooperate. And someone has asked me about, in the questions about the relationship between NGOs. It exists to a certain extent, but the access to detention facilities for NGOs in the MENA region is restricted to a certain level. There's a variety in the different countries. A country like Jordan would be more open, a country like Yemen would be more open, but other countries within the region would have more restrictions on NGOs to have access to detention and being able to provide direct services and support the prison departments in their works towards juveniles or adults. Signaling, labeling, and stigmatization, and the criminal record. It's true, actually, that all of the juvenile laws and legislations in the MENA region said that criminal records should not be kept for children, while in reality, this is not the case. It's true that when they are 18 years old, they will be able to get a certificate that says that they do not have criminal record, but it will stay in their internal files within the governments and the authorities for the rest of their life. And this is usually in some countries affect their recruitment with, for example, police force, the army, and other secret intelligence, for example, departments that works within the state. So it has an impact on them, even with the fact that according to the law, they should not be having any criminal record. Minimum age of criminal responsibility vary in the MENA region. It's a start from 7, which is a very low number. As you can see in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and also in Sudan, to 13 in countries like Algeria and Tunisia. But the problem with the minimum age of criminal responsibility in some countries is the contradiction between what is mentioned at the Children Law or Children Act or the Juvenile Justice Law and the criminal code. For example, in Yemen, until now, there's no clear definition for what is the child. Is it 18 or 16 or 12? And this has a huge relation to the criminal proceeding that you can take against the children at a certain level. In a country like Yemen and a country like Sudan, where I would say, I can't really recall the percentage for each country precisely, but I would say that around, let's say 40% of the population do not have birth certificates, including children, and in Mauritania too. You can imagine the legal problems surrounding the issue of determining the age of minimum criminal responsibility for these children. In Yemen, in many cases, and I remember and I recall that through our experience, we had to interfere and work with the authorities to try to stop the execution of around 25 individuals who were children when they committed crimes by trying to identify their actual age right now through forensic medicine doctors, because the courts didn't take their birth certificates into consideration, the ones that they acquired later, not when they were born. The age of minimum criminal responsibility and determining that at the judicial procedures is one of the main challenges that many of the MENA countries have been facing, as I said, and in many cases, unfortunately, it had led to the execution of individuals for crimes that they committed when they were children. I know very well that you have been introduced a lot and to a number of information about Iraq, but I wanted to put it forward for you with figures. So we will know the size of the problem that we're dealing. There's around 1,113 child in Iraqi care centers, staying in 5 juvenile care centers in Baghdad, and small centers. So the photos that you have seen about the overcrowding are real ones on the ground. And when it comes to children detained on basis of national security, there are some reports that says, like Human Rights Watch reports, that says that there's around 1,500 child alone at the Kurdish area. Many of these children are kept in detention, as I said, and sometimes parents ask for that. I gave you one example, not all of the data, about the number of children kept at Basra prison in Baghdad for you to know what is the situation. And in general, since we're talking about numbers and figures, the number of children in detention in MENA region is not really a very high number, okay? However, the number of children who come in contact with the law is a high number. But due to a number of factors within this region, you will find out that children who end up in detention are not really a very high number. And I will give Jordan as an example later that will clarify what I'm just saying. And if, for example, if we will look at Algeria, there are around 350 child maybe right now in detention. In Yemen today, there are around 224 child in detention. In Morocco also the number is not really that high if you compare it to the prison population. We're talking about around 500 children out of around 72,000 adult prisoners. The other point that I want to highlight in this slide is the girl child. We said that children in detention are little numbers by themselves, but girls are even very, very little, compensate very little number. And for example, if you look in Algeria, you will find 3 girls in detention, 11 girls in detention. In Jordan, there are 3 girls at a juvenile care center today. And in detention in Yemen, up to today, they had 6 girls in detention. The fact that girls are a minority is what we call a sword of 2 edges. Part of it is like, wow, we're happy that little girls do not really commit or tend to violence that much. And it's good that they are a minority, but at the same time, the fact that they are a minority put them facing double discrimination. The fact that they are a minority makes states not to prioritize really investing in special places for this girl child. You will find out that many of them are kept in women detention facilities with adults. And this is what we mentioned earlier when we said the majority are kept with adults. You will find a country or a state with telling you, why would I open a specialized care center or a detention facility for 5 girls or for, let's say, 20 or 30 girls who come across the whole year and end up in detention. Little resources are invested in really creating proper accommodations for little girls in detentions and in their rehabilitation and reintegration that is provided for them. The other aspect when it comes to girls and within the criminal justice system that I always like to highlight, and it's part maybe of the little number, is what we have called as the informal justice system. In many countries like Palestine, Yemen, Sudan, we have a strong informal justice system. And this system usually is not gender sensitive towards women and little girls, and it discriminates against them. And there's more work and need for investing in this system, since it's part of the culture that is very difficult to change, is to invest in making it gender sensitive towards these girls and towards their characteristics and needs. In general, there's little disaggregated data available about girls in the criminal justice system, and it makes it very difficult to have information about it. All what I mentioned can be summarized here, that children should be separated from adults, proper conditions, proper rehabilitation, proper reintegration, and all of the child-sensitive, effective programs that they should be, and approach that they should be dealt with. In general, children in contact with the law in MENA would go to two paths. Detention, that we have highlighted above and we talked about, and the other one is non-custodial measures. But I love this slide because this slide focuses our attention on, regardless of what would be the results of the decision in the criminal by courts, by the public prosecutors, is to detain the child or send her or send him to non-custodial measures. This child should be dealt with as a separate individual through what we call the individualized assessment. Each child who gets in contact with the law, if we want to guarantee that they will not go back to committing any offenses and for recidivism, we need to work with them because there's something wrong. Either problems with the family, problems in the community, bad influence from adults or peers, challenging living circumstances. So we need to work with these children and try to help them not to come in contact with the law again. There's a need for the individualized assessment, as you can see. It should take into consideration the psychological situation, economic, social status, age, gender, maturity. And then there's a need to develop a special intervention program that can target, that has several targets and that focus on their psychological, social support, social skills, preparation for the release if they are in the community in detention, or if they are doing a community service or enrolled in a rehabilitation program. Any intervention with any child should involve his family and community. This is essential and very important and will be more protective. The other thing, the child participation in the decision-making process is crucial. I don't know if you can see the purple column that's going across all the slide, which says the best interest of the child. The best interest of the child should be the primary consideration for any intervention that we do. In an ideal world, an ideal situation, diverting children from the criminal justice system should be the first choice. It has been proven by studies, research, name it, that children experience of going through the criminal justice system causes stress, anxiety, and if it's unpleasant experience where children are subject to abuse, ill treatment, or torture, it will end up having a trauma for these children. Our main purpose should be to divert these children from the formal criminal justice proceeding, and the diversion can happen at different levels at the different stages. I will tell you our experience in Jordan, where we worked at the diversion at the police level. In 2012, PRI and other institutions worked with the Jordanian authorities to create the so-called juvenile police department, a specialized police department that deals with children who commit offenses or accused of crimes in Jordan. Between 2012 till 2019, the department dealt with almost 20,000 child. The figures are there. Through this, and this department is authorized by the law to do what we call reconciliation and conflict resolution between the victim and the perpetrator, and try to solve the issues at the police station level and sort things out at an early level. We found out that this department managed to divert 60.4% of the children who come in contact with the law at the police level, which means 11,677 child. This early diversion mechanism helped children to stay at their homes, at their schools, to avoid stress, anxiety, and gave them another chance to reflect and understand what they did wrong. These are some of the models and examples that we look for. Because, you'll ask me why. It's unfortunate that many of the children, when they reach the level of the judiciary, the principle of diversion as the principle of imprisonment is the first choice for many of the judges. And there's a huge work that still needs to be done to advocate for detention as a measure of last resort. And this is actually does not only apply to children in MENA region, this also applies to adults. And there's what I usually call overuse of imprisonment and harsh on the crime approach and philosophy that the judges do have. We talked about alternative as diversion as an option, while the other option is alternative to detention through available alternatives within legislations, bail, notice, whatever, and community service, or diverting the children, similar to what we have in the Jordanian law, to specific psychological support programs or vocational programs as part of, instead of imprisonment. Many, I would not say many actually, few countries in the MENA region implement alternative to imprisonment for children. Algeria has been a pioneer in this field. So if you look at the number of children in detention in Algeria, as we mentioned, it's a very low one. But a major reason for that is that they have an effective, proper alternative to imprisonment system on the ground where children are diverted to community service programs. And if you go to PRI website, you will be able to see some videos and resources that document the work of children at community service in Algeria. Morocco also is using that, has a pilot. It's not yet enacted fully at the Moroccan Penal Code. So judges are just using what is available with the current legislations that they have. It's the same for Yemen, while in Jordan there's a huge list of alternatives that is available for children. It is unfortunate that it's not really implemented fully on the ground as we wish for, and part of the challenges and the reasons for that is the difficulty in finding a placement where children could serve the community service that was choosing for the judges. This slide is for information about what I talked about earlier about the individualizing the sentence and studying and dealing with each child as a unique case to be able really to provide the proper rehabilitation and reintegration programs. There's a lot to be said about rehabilitation and reintegration programs. When I started in the first slide, I said that the main purpose for imprisonment should be the rehabilitation and reintegration of the children. Many of the care centers or detention facilities that we have do have to an extent rehabilitation and reintegration programs. But the problem is that few number of children really enroll in them. They do not meet the market need, and they are not made based on market research. And they do not take into consideration the technological development that took place in this era and how children now are dealing with technology different than us who are 40 at this age or younger or older than that. So they are not really responsive enough to the needs of the children, and there's a need to invest more and more in creating these workshops. And there's a need to really stress and focus more on the importance of keeping children within the regular education system that they should be attending at this age. One of the other also important aspects when we talk about children in MENA region through the criminal justice system is aftercare. In Jordan lately, we have been witnessing a number of really ugly crimes that has happened in the society, and unfortunately, they were committed by children. And one of the things that the media really captured was the fact that many of these children have criminal record, like they went to care centers 12 times, 13 times, 14 times. When you analyze the issue and you analyze the problem, and that we discussed, and we saw that there's a gap and weakness in the rehabilitation and reintegration programs, you can add on that there's a huge weakness in what we call the post-release aftercare support that should be provided for children upon their release, so we can guarantee that they will not go back to detention and to reduce the rate of their recidivism. Unfortunately, in the Arab region, there's still a gap in this program. There are two good models that exist within the region, which I hope that other countries would replicate and look at and study thoroughly, which is in Morocco, Mohammed Fifth Foundation for the reintegration and rehabilitation of inmates. and it works with adults and children and all categories of people who are kept in detention, through providing them with all support when they leave: economic support, social support, health support, educational support, so they will not feel that they are alone in the community. And the different programs ran by Mohammed V Foundation managed really to help in reducing the recidivism rate for children in Morocco. The other model that we have is in Algeria. In Algeria, they have what they call reintegration offices that are associated to the prison department, to the prison directorate in Algeria, and they work with the prisoners and with the children while they are inside detention and follow them after their release in the community and provide them with all of social, psycho, economic support that is needed for their effective reintegration into society. This is a link that's still weak, and we need to work further on its support. And I know that you talked with other experts with a specific focus on children deprived of their liberty based on national security ground, and I'm sure that you went through all of the challenging facing them and about also the recommendations of the study. And I would like to end sharing with you one of the main lessons that I learned tackling this issue over the years, either working with adults or with the children. Any approach or intervention to deal with violent extremism and countering violent and countering radicalization should be grounded based on human rights, rule of law, democracy, and justice. Security response is not an answer. We need to have more democratic openness in dealing with these people, because the root causes for their either tendency to violence, general violence here, when I'm talking about gangs and different groups, or violent extremism, are embedded in the injustice that they have felt in the society by one reason or another: social, racial, religious, economic, or name it. So what we need is an equal society that respects the human dignity of all human beings, to make sure that we all have equal treatment. With that, I end, and looking forward to receive any questions from your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Taghreed. This was really fascinating, very insightful, very important aspects from the issue of multiple discrimination against the girl child, for example, who is discriminated not only because she is a child, but also because she is a girl. That was a very important point that we touched upon a little also in our course. I also found very interesting what you said about the good examples that you gave, whether that it was in Morocco or Algeria, or also the example that you gave from Jordan. I think these are inspiring ideas and practices that could hopefully not only be multiplied in the region, but also sometimes, think about extra outside the region, also in other regions of the world who might face similar problems, especially in terms of reintegration and rehabilitation. This is something that we have seen in the MOOC is a common sort of like, first of all, it's a recommendation in the UN Global Study, but also is something that in every region of the world should be really taken seriously and assessed properly. Another issue that I think we discussed in the MOOC already, and that you highlighted as well, is the question of collecting data and being able to disaggregate this the data, because if you don't know exactly who are the victims, because we always have to remember that children should be seen as victims, not as participants or as perpetrators in a way. So if you don't know who exactly these victims are, these children are, you cannot then find measures to address the problems. So thank you again for highlighting this. I have so many other questions, but I want to give the floor also to the participants who have, some of them have asked questions in the forum, in the MOOC, and some others, like Gregory, I think, have asked questions already here in the chat. And before I tackle these questions, I want to remind our participants in this webinar that if you also have questions, there is still some time. You can write them in the chat, or you can just write your name and say that you would like to ask the floor, and we can give you the microphone. So let's go first with the question by Gregory. I hope the name is correct. I can only see the username here on the screen. It's in the chat, Taghreed, so you can also see it. And there's a question about what could be the best solution to combat the issue of children in detention with their primary caregivers, with their mothers generally.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this questions. And as I said, this category is also a very close category to my heart, because they did nothing. These kids, these toddlers, these babies, always think of them like that, you know, to be placed in detention and to spend the first 2, 3, 4 years, and in some countries up to 7 years in detention facilities, and the early years of their age just only behind bars. One of the things, there are solutions at the international legal frame. Bangkok rules and different legislations give the option to the judiciary to actually seek alternative to detention in the community for women who are having children and who are the caregiver of a bearer of some kids. The priority should be to keep these children outside detention. If they are not really a threat to the national security and to others or to the life of others, why would you put a woman and her child inside detention? So there's lots of work that we need to do to raise this issue out loud by really promoting alternative to children. The other thing, okay, we ended up in some cases having children in detention. One of the things that we have been doing for the past 6 years as an organization is whenever we can, we create a specialized mothers and babies unit for children inside detention. A unit that takes the needs and provide a proper environment for upbringing these children inside detention. In Yemen, we did 9 mothers and babies units. The photos that you have seen, we changed many of them into a beautiful reality. And we provided early educational programs for these children to learn how to speak, to pronounce the alphabets and all of these things. We did the same in Tunisia. We did the same in Morocco, in Algeria. And I urge everybody to pay attention to that. And again, when you talk to donors and when you talk to international community interlocutors, they will tell you that they see that this is a minority, group. Actually, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. I thought it's on mute. But anyway, they do see that this is a minority group that does not really, and why would I, the same approach as governments, why would I open a specialized mothers and baby unit for in a prison where only 3 babies are kept? So our argument should be stronger, and we should aim to provide more protection for these groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Taghreed. I want to pick up on the point that you mentioned here about the international community, the sort of like broader network of stakeholders, donors as well, you know. You also mentioned the Bangkok rules, and you know there are standards, international standards that are available that contrast with the political will, as you mentioned a couple of times already in your presentation. And especially with this issue of children deprived of liberty not being an interesting group, or like, you know, a group worthwhile some investment.
Exactly.
So I want to pick up on that, because we also received a question in the forum by Rosie, who asked, what do you think about the role of the international community and the importance of international standards? Do they support and empower somehow these children and those who care for the children? Or are they limiting the action that can be carried out, or maybe a bit of both?
Yeah, to be honest, we have a very comprehensive international framework, you know, starting from the CRC to the different guidelines and United Nations documents that have been issued in this and regulations that have been issued in this regard. And here I would like to mention for the participants of the MOOC, the new Chatal memorandum. I don't know if the participants and the students have the opportunity to look at it. It's a very important, actually, memorandum that talks about the approach in which the criminal justice system should respond to children in counter-terrorism context. And it's highlight the best practices, the approaches, and how the system should be built. And it's a very valuable resource that they can actually visit and look at. It is unfortunate, as I told you, and you can imagine how difficult it is with the children. So if you compare it to adults, I always say that it's not among the most popular groups that community and that donors and international community would like to support. While this is very wrong, because if you look at the price of security and the protection of the children in general, you need to invest a lot in that as a society. Some countries are doing by putting massive budgets internally in their local context to support these groups and their reintegration, and they consider it, as I said, the price of having a secure, safe community, while others are not. We need to utilize all the available resources, yani as stakeholders working in this field. And we always, and when I started, I show you that MENA is a very young region. So if you don't really invest in this young people, you will not be contributing to shape the future of this region. So this should be the argument.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. I think there is another question in the chat that also relates to questions that were asked in the forum. It's about religion and culture. And the question here is about how do you think religion and culture contribute to how children are handled in the region? So would you say attitudes are influenced by society's perception of these children? Another question in the forum that's a bit related to this is how is Sharia law implementation somehow influencing and impacting on the situation?
Okay. Let me start by saying that Sharia law is a major source of legislations and constitutions in the Arab region. Okay, and you will find that referenced in almost all constitutions of the Arab world. Okay, it's one of the main sources for legislations. How states and countries have used that is different. Some states has applied that to the criminal proceeding codes, like a country like Yemen, for example, where you would find that there are 350 crimes that are punishable by death penalty. Many of them are based on Sharia and taken from Sharia law. And as I said, death penalty in Yemen may apply to children due to the problem and the lack that we have in the system and the definition of a children that is there. Or you will find other countries that they only limited the implementation of Sharia law to what we call the personal status law, that is related to that organized marriage, mirath, inheritance, and all of these issues. Definitely, they impact children in general, and they impact girl child mostly. And when we talk about early marriage, and I didn't share the information with you about early marriage, where there's a high percentage and number, it's in front of me. If you bear with me 1 second, I think I can share with you the percentage. of children. 1 in 5 girls in the region are married before the age of 18. Girl-child early marriage in Yemen, 32%. In Palestine, 19%. Iraq and Egypt, 17%. Syria, 13%. Jordan, 10%, according to UNICEF statistics. So the fact that girls can marry that early as part of the influence of Sharia law and culture on this issue may put them on more risk in being subject actually to violence and increase the opportunities and the chances of them getting in contact with the law according to the system that we have explained lately, either as victims or as girls who would commit offenses or whatever, you know. Cultural perspectives, definitely. Conservative societies, you will find that, and this is again explains what we mentioned about the girls being a minority also at the system. In conservative societies, where the role of girls is very limited to go to school, coming home, go to school, coming home, just going out with her parents, you will find that this will influence the fact that she will not be really in a real interaction with the society, and the likelihood for her committing any offense or making any problem is lower than her brother, you know, who is allowed to go wherever he wants and play wherever he wants. So the culture play a very important role, and I'm giving you this in a very simple examples actually, so you can link it on reality. Because I like always for people to see what are things on the day, what is the daily life of these people, how they interact. So you will be able to have a better picture of what should be done to work with them. So Sharia and culture definitely has an influence.
Thank you. I think there is another question, and I'm looking also at the time so that I'm conscious that we are slowly running out of time. So I think we will take this last question and close the chat for the questions in order for us also to be able to have a nice conclusion. So the question comes from Claire. Again, it's in the chat. So Claire is thanking you very much, Taghreed, for your excellent presentation, and asked to speak a bit more about the impact of separation from parents or guardians on detained children. What are the most important protections that should be put in place to mitigate the impact of separation from parents on detained children? Regular familiar visit, parents being present during interrogations, etc.
Okay, definitely. When children go through the criminal justice system, one of the main things that we should make sure as practitioners and people working in the field, that they have someone who's supporting them mentally and psychologically. It's a must. And unfortunately, this lack among almost all of the systems that we have in the MENA region. Some countries, they don't even have legal representation for children when they go in front of in contact with the law. The impact is very high. As I said, the high level of stress, anxiety. What we can do is accompanying these children through continuous support as one of the things, and other things to avoid sending them to detention, to work as hard as we can to promote alternative as the first choice for the criminal justice system on how to deal with the children. And here I encourage you all to look at the African Commission for Human and People Rights, and especially the African Commission on the Rights of the Child, have prepared a very amazing and interesting general comment that is focusing on the children of detained parents, and at the same time the impact of detention or children. It's a very good resource. By the way, and I will email Angela and the colleagues at MOOC some of the resources that I suggest that can be really helpful for you. So you can look at it and you can look at the variety of options that are there on how to deal with this distress.
Thank you, Taghreed. And I appreciate like all the participants as well, that you will share additional resources with us. We will also put this webinar, the recording, on the platform so that also those who were not able to participate can still learn from you and be inspired by you. I think there is only one last question that we can take again. So very quickly, do you think that the perception of concepts like human rights, democracy, and rule of law being Western somehow threaten the ability to uphold them in the MENA region?
One of the things that we do as a human rights activists in the MENA is that we always defend these concepts as not being Western concepts. And we always say that we have contributed to drafting them, including Saudi Arabia, one of the most conservative countries in the world, and that they are embedded, as a Muslim, I would say, that they are embedded in the Quran and they are embedded in the Islamic sharia law. What we face is an attack from those who act against the human rights, trying to label them as a Western concepts that we are trying to bring to the society, while in reality they are not. So our fight is not with the concepts and how we can make them applicable or no. Our fight is with those who are trying to label them as Western concept. And one of the things is there's nothing wrong in anything, regardless of its source, if it's there to protect the dignity of a human beings and to protect their rights and not to really harm them. So these are the principles for which we work. But thank you for the question. It's a very important one.
Yes, and it's a very important answer that you gave, I think, because once again, you are inspiring us to think beyond some classifications, but think more about the dignity of a human being, and in this particular case, also of children. And as it's been highlighted in the UN Global Study, throughout the study, we should never forget that even if there is only one child in detention, is one too many. Detention is not a place for a child. The children should be given back their childhood, which is the motto of the study as well. So on these very inspirational comments, Taghreed, I want to thank you very much for your excellent presentation, for spending time with us, for providing us with further materials and resources. I also want to thank all the participants and those that have attended today's webinar, have posed questions in the forum and in the chat here. I hope the discussions will continue on the MOOC, and we will make a treasure of what we have learned together today.